Hello everybody and welcome to the W podcast episode 5. Today we are talking about the destruction of the middle class. So let's just pinpoint the exact moment that this started happening. And I could pinpoint it to when the vid, we'll call it, happened. And the government printed out all this money. Okay, money printer went brrr, and everybody was like, oh, we're getting all this free money. Now, I've been telling people on my social media, my TikTok, which is Finance Fatty, for a while that no money is free and there's going to be repercussions to these actions. People used to tell me I was crazy. Well, you cannot just print money and have no effects. Essentially, when you print money, you are devaluing the currency.
It just makes sense, right? Because there's more of it. Mm-hmm. So, let's say, you have $1,000 and that's the total amount of currency there is. If you print another 1,000, then a dollar only has the same power as, it has half of the power it used to have, really, right? Because you printed double the amount. That's kind of the dumb way to explain things, but that's basically what it is.
It's basically what's happening. So in the past, every time we've seen like an influx of money enter, you see inflation that happens.
Yeah.
Which is exactly what we saw happen following the printing of money. And it didn't happen right away. First we saw, stocks crashed almost indefinitely after. They rallied like crazy. The price of real estate also went up like crazy following the printing of all this money, because now you have all this extra money.
Yeah.
Okay, just floating around, which, what do wealthy people do with money?
Make more of it.
They make more of it, so they invest it, so they put it in assets, stocks, real estate, so it caused all of the assets to rise in price. And who ends up suffering when they do this?
Well, the good old middle class, guys.
The middle class, which ended up being, like I just said, destroyed. Why do I say the middle class has been destroyed? Well, in Canada now, if you make 100K, back in the day, okay, before the vid, you were living a pretty freaking good life, man.
Yeah. You could go out to restaurants as much as you wanted. You could have a decent car. You could have a decent place. You could have a nice vacation for your family at least once a year on a $100,000 a year salary. It was, it was something to be proud of, because you're like, man, you know what? This is the magic number. If I make $100,000 a year, I can live comfortably. And if my boss pays me $100,000 a year, I should hold on to that job for dear life, because God knows that not a lot of people can make that. Mm-hmm. What was the average income back then? I think the family average income was less than that.
I think the average income is about 50K, give or take.
Yeah, so like making 100, you're like, man, I'm doing great. And you were doing great. Mm-hmm. So we're filming this in March 2024, and let me tell you, $100,000 isn't what it used to be.
Doesn't get you very far, actually. If you make 100K, you will just be getting by. Can you even afford a house on 100K? Not really, unless you want to live paycheck to paycheck and struggle.
Yeah, I mean, maybe in some smaller cities you could, but let's say like we're talking about this from a Montrealer perspective, right? We're in Montreal, Quebec. Over here, it's really not that much. I mean, sure, you can survive, but the point of the story is the average is still 50. Mm-hmm. And that's where the middle class is. Mm-hmm.
And now we're saying 100K is the bare minimum to get by.
Yeah.
So imagine the average person that's only earning around 50,000, 60,000.
Yeah.
Now, well, if 100, you're just getting by, what are you doing if you're only making $50,000, $60,000?
Well, look, first of all the leisure activities have to go out the window, right? because you don't have any budget. So let's dumb it down. Let's say 60,000. I don't really want to mess up the math here, but that gives you what, $4,000 a month? Sorry, no, less than that.
I'd have to take out my like income tax
You'd
calculator
have to
and
income tax calculator, yeah.
because we live in Quebec, which is taxed at the highest rate, so much of our money goes to taxes here.
Yeah, and at 50,000, it's what's the marginal tax rate? Like 25, 26%, something like that. Anyway, look, the point I'm trying to make is after your living expenses, let's say you're renting, because usually you're renting if that's how much you make. After your food, after your car payments, after your gas payments, after the variety of insurance payments you have, after your clothing, after your necessities, the stuff you pay for that you need to keep on living your life. What do you have left over? Basically nothing. And not only do you not have anything left over, is that most of the time you probably have credit cards that are filled up. So you go into debt, you don't really get out of it. And how does that make you feel? Are you happy knowing that you're going into debt? What about your kids who are growing up, who are going to college these days? What kind of salaries can they expect? What about your kids who go into construction? What kind of salaries can they expect? Like I have a friend who's a welder, and back in the day, a welder who was about 40 years old would make more than enough money to cover for himself and his family. He can barely scrape by.
Nowadays, in 2024.
Is that fair to someone like that? Someone who, 3 years ago was doing fine. Nothing really changed for him aside from inflation. So again, you print all that money, you ask people to stay at home, you say that it's for reasons of health and security, which again, that's not the debate here.
But how did it affect the middle class, the average person, by doing this?
Well, everybody's life got worse.
Significantly worse, except for the people who are already rich or wealthy.
Yeah.
They got richer.
They did.
They got richer. But the middle class now is in massive debt.
Yeah.
The people that collected $2,000 a month from the CERB, a lot of them just went ahead and they spent it, like carelessly, right? Or they needed to spend it on living expenses because their jobs were shut down. Well, then tax time came around and it was taxable. So then they owed the government money.
Yeah.
And then, maybe they're living paycheck to paycheck and they can't afford to pay this back in lump sum. So now they're paying interest on top of the money owed. So it's even driving them further in debt.
Yeah.
So who did that actually help? Is a question I want to ask you guys to think about. Who did that help?
It's a great question. It didn't help me at all. I have to earn 1.5 times as much as I did before 2020 to have a similar lifestyle. I know because I've budgeted it, and it's the only way to survive is you have to make more money. But what if you're in a field where you can't really make more money? Like I'm in sales, so to me, sorry. To me, it's kind of not that it's easy, but like it's possible. I would have to work harder, but it's possible. Like there's a path there.
Because you make commissions.
Because I make commission, because I can find a field where I can, take a percentage of the total amount that I sell, which is the whole reason I got into sales. But sales isn't for everyone, right? What if you're a teacher? What happens then? Like just recently in Quebec, we had this whole strike thing where teachers apparently got what they wanted. But you talk to them and they didn't really get what they wanted. They kind of got what the best they could. But are they happy?
I was in that field.
Yeah,
and I'll tell you the reason why I left that field was because it was so low paying, and I recognized that very early on. And I said I'm not going to waste my time being in something where I can't have the lifestyle I want. And so I left. And from there I went on to open my own daycares, which introduced me into business. and construction, because you have construction when doing commercial daycares.
Yeah.
But pretty much it was through the experience and seeing the paycheck where I was like, no. Because I've always been very ambitious and wanting a certain type of lifestyle. And so when I started in the education sector, I saw that was not going to happen there. And so that's why I ventured into business. But for the teachers, yeah, you need those people. They are, educating the next generation. And they just are paid very poorly. And I feel for them because with all the inflation, their salaries definitely are not keeping up with it. And that's for any given job. Any given job, your salary is not keeping up with the inflation that just went on these past couple years. There is no way. So what ends up happening now? You're struggling a lot more. You're probably taking on more debt. And you probably have to downgrade your lifestyle. Maybe you have to cut out your vacations. Maybe you have to cut back on certain leisures that you enjoyed just because the price of everything skyrocketed.
Just the food that you eat, man. Like, think about it. Like, we on a previous episode, we were talking about the carnivore diet, right? And like, that shit was fucking expensive, man.
How much did
oh, geez, $100 a day. On some day, like I went crazy on some days, but like, sure, you could eat ground beef all the time, but then it gets boring. Like, but just as a family, like we were a family of 4, and we'd spend way too much on groceries every month, and we weren't living that well, like we survived, sure, we were happy, sure, we didn't really miss anything, sure, but we weren't the middle class. What about people who are in the middle class? Let's say, you're both starting out a new life as, your early 20s, like anybody could be, and you're both teachers, and you're both making, what's the average, what's the starting salary for a teacher now,
I don't know. I think it's something like 20, 25 an hour.
So let's say 50 grand a year. That makes it $100,000 a year for both of you.
Which we said is the bare minimum, like you can just get by off of that.
You can just get by, and then you don't have children yet, and when you have kids, one of you isn't working for a year, and sure, you have maternity leave, but is it
it's
enough?
A certain percentage of your salary.
Yeah, it's just, it sucks that we're in a place where in order to be comfortable, you have to be an overachiever. Back in the day, growing up, you would say that no matter what field you chose,
you were good.
There's a life there for you. Like, sure, there are careers that are more high paying, like astronauts or like doctors or like lawyers, but that was for like higher than average people.
Yeah.
And it was for them. But for people who are average,
they could still have a nice life.
Yeah.
Back then, you could be the father or the breadwinner, and you could support an entire family and have a house and have a car and maybe a boat and maybe a cottage.
Yeah.
Nowadays, you have to be probably 2 high income earners to have a life like that.
Basically, yeah. Or even let's say you're 2 medium income earners. What happens to your kids if both of you work 40 hours a week? Do you see them? No, you don't. You wake up early in the morning, you get them ready to go to daycare / to school. You drop them off at school at 7:30, 8 o'clock. You drive back to your job, starts at 9, finishes at 5. You go get your kids at 6 p.m. You make them dinner in a rush at 7. You watch TV or play around with them for a couple of hours, brings you to 9 o'clock, and you rinse and repeat and do that over and over again until you die. What kind of life is that?
But also, because the cost of living is so high, it causes both parents to be forced to work just to simply get by and pay the bills.
Yeah.
So it's like, for some people, what choice do you really have?
You don't.
If you want your child to have a good life and not struggle and, suffer, and you want to kind of provide for them, because that's the point of having a kid. You want to obviously be able to provide them a good life, or give them something
more
positive.
than what you've had.
Exactly.
And you can't do that unless you sacrifice your time with them. And what's more important for a child than time with their parent? Nothing. And in order for your child to be happy, you have to make a choice on the type of food you're going to be able to put on the table, or the type of environment you get to raise them in. You want to have your kids do any kind of sports? Well, you can't do that anymore. You can't do that anymore because if you do it, then you won't get to spend time with them. So really, you're always facing an impossible choice, a choice that 4 years ago you wouldn't have to face. How did that happen? And I mean, we know how it happened. What can we do as a society, and what can we do as people, as individuals, to make sure that that never happens again? Like, we're all guilty of what happened in the last couple of years. We accepted it, we let it go.
Yeah, we didn't do anything about it, really. We just
we
accepted, and we took the free money. In the case, most people just were happy about that. They said it was free. But now, if you reflect back and see what's happening today, would you really say that was free? If it literally destroyed the middle class completely. Now we have either people who are in large amounts of debt or barely getting by, or you have super wealthy and successful people that bought up the assets at a cheap price or invested the money, and they're still well off. They're not struggling whatsoever, you know. Maybe for them, okay, if the economy goes to shit, they have to sell like one of their jets, for example. They are definitely not in the same
different kind of problems.
Different problems, for real. But like, they are definitely not in the same position, or maybe can even relate to what is going on in reality right now, where people, they're working their jobs and they're still going to food banks because they can't afford the price of groceries, which is actually happening. The amount of people going to food banks is going up.
And again, I understand that food banks are necessary, but Jesus, food banks and their whole reason to exist is to help the less fortunate members of society.
People in poverty.
People in poverty. Are we living in a world where regular people are in poverty? And if we are, what does that mean? What does that mean going forward? Because what happens, you know, it's 2024. What happens 5 years from now if things don't change? What happens 10 years from now if things don't change? Are we magically going to go back to a world of abundance? Are we magically going to live in a planet where we can choose to have whatever career we want based on our preferences, based on our temperament, and then just kind of assume that things are going to go well? No.
We can't do that.
We can't do that anymore.
The reality is, unless you are a high income earner, you are not having a house. A house is more of a luxury item. The average house is out of reach for a lot of people, a lot of average people. So then, how do we go about it? Well, you would have to pick a career path or a skill that is very high paying. And that's kind of the only way, to be honest.
Because what else can you do?
Because if you're going to be the average, you are going to have to rent.
Yeah, and renting's fine. It's not an issue, but if it's your only choice, that's the issue. Like, we're not trying to say that, you know, certain life choices are bad. What we're trying to say, and what we're effectively saying, is that if those choices become your only options...
Exactly. That's the problem.
That's the problem. This is supposed to be a free country, and it's supposed to be a free society. How free do you feel where you are? Do you feel free? I don't. And I'm not middle class, and I don't feel free. So how free do you feel? I don't know, man. It's the weirdest thing, right? Because, like, it's 2024. You raise your kids in a world where based on your experience, that's usually how parenting works, right? You kind of live through things, and you kind of change things a little bit with the environment or with the times, and then you kind of repeat it. But I can't do that. My son is 3 years old. Am I going to be able to tell him 10 years from now, sure, I know exactly what kind of choices you can make that will lead to this path or this path or this path? I can't. I have my stepson is 13. He dreams of becoming a WWE wrestler. I hope to God he achieves it, because if he doesn't, what's he going to be? He's going to be a regular guy, sure, but what can a regular guy do in this day and age? Nothing. It feels like you have to be extraordinary to achieve something.
It feels like you have to be, like I said, like you have to earn high.
You have to be a high earner. You have no choice
to live a normal life, which is the issue.
Yeah, and you shouldn't have to be that way. It shouldn't have to be that way.
So then when you're telling him, oh, what career should you go into? Okay, maybe you should be a doctor, a lawyer, in sales, own a business.
Sales is probably the easiest path of entry. Owning a business too. Because if you think about it, to be a doctor, you need to go to school for what? I don't know, 10 years, something like that. Lawyer, probably less than that, hopefully less than that. But still, you have to go to school for a long time, and that does not guarantee success because they're very competitive fields.
On top of it, then you have to pay for college and university, which is also pretty pricey.
Yeah, and what happens there in colleges and universities? Do you really just learn stuff that you're supposed to become a good technician, like a good doctor or a good lawyer? I don't know, man. We're going to do another episode on colleges and universities. If you want a head start, listen to Dr. Jordan B. Peterson. He has some interesting content that he's been sharing since 2016 about what happens on colleges and universities. You want to, you want to go there. You want to send your kids there, go ahead. But it's not as easy a choice as it used to be. I would think about it twice. I'm grateful that I don't have to make that decision for my son for another, decade and a half or so. Because Jesus, if I had to make that choice today, I don't know if I would advise him to go into college. I think I'd tell him, you know what, buddy, let's get you to a trade school, and in the meantime, let's kind of teach you the value of money, teach you about businesses, find out what you like, and kind of find a way to monetize whatever it is that you like spending your time doing.
Because that's how you will be successful in today's day and age.
You have no choice. You can't be like you can't be average.
You can't be average.
I mean, you could be if that's what you want.
If you want the bare minimum life, which is essentially struggling.
Yeah.
Essentially.
Isn't the whole point of life overcoming struggles? Why are we on this earth? We have a chance to be better, and that's why we're here. And if we don't have a chance to be better, then where are we? Have we created our own little hell? That's kind of what it feels like sometimes.
It kind of does feel like that sometimes.
Yeah.
I do say that often. Earth is like a version of hell because it is so difficult. Unless, there are those people who are born into wealth and have trust funds and their life is on easy mode. But for like the 99...
We're not... If you're listening...
We're not them.
Listen, if you're a trust fund kid...
you know what?
You can... Please come share your experience. I would love to understand what life is like for you. I have no idea. I assume it's easy. Maybe it's not. I don't know, man.
Everybody has problems. They just have different kind of problems.
Yeah, I think the hardest thing you've done is the hardest thing you've done. So you can compare it to like I've lived through some hard shit in my life, and I can I know what my lowest point is, and if compared to you, for example, it would be different. But I'm sure someone for whom the hardest thing they've ever done was lose their Ferrari on their 17th birthday. I mean, I would laugh at it like, really, what an asshole. You lost your Ferrari, you think that's hard. But really, for that person, maybe that is the hardest thing that they lived through. And maybe they feel as awful about losing that Ferrari as I do about the hard stuff that happened to me. So, as a parenthesis, maybe not judge people according to your standards, but understand that they have different standards and understand that they have different emotions. We're all the same, but we're all a little bit different too. But I still want to talk to you trust fund kids. We need to know we need to know what you guys think about. We need to know how you see what's happening to us. How do you guys see the middle class evaporating? Is it something that worries you? Is it something that you have no notion of at all? What's your life like over the past couple of years? In 2019 versus 2024, is it that different, or is it the same because whatever? I don't know. Yeah, that would be interesting, to have someone like that.
It would be interesting. Yes, it would. But like I said, the rich have been not really affected in compared to the average.
I don't think they have been. I think you're right. I think you're right. If we're wrong, I'm sorry, but please come tell us we're wrong.
Whenever somebody suffers, like the 2008 housing crash, it's always the middle class that suffers the most
Yeah.
The poor, they're already in poverty, but it's always the middle class that takes the biggest hit.
It's the change, right?
Yeah.
It's the change. Well, that's what happened. It's
because your lifestyle might have been like over here. Maybe it wasn't up here, but it was like over here. But then something big happens and then it drops your lifestyle significantly. Because now your salary is not worth as much as it used to. You don't have as much buying power anymore. Money is just worth less, but things are more expensive.
Yeah.
But your salary kind of remained the same.
Yeah.
So then what do you do with that? Maybe get another job. Maybe start a side hustle. Maybe improve your skills to get a better paying job. These are some things you can do, but just staying at the same job, well, your quality of life is going to go down.
And that's kind of the moral of the story as this episode slowly draws to a close, is that you can't live the life you thought you were going to live. You have to innovate. You have to change. You have to look at other options. You have to understand that the world you thought you lived in
is not the
that's
same.
gone. It's over. It's never coming back. And you have to adapt to it. Adaptation is a very important skill. As humans, we've adapted as a species to every little thing that the world threw at us. And that's why we're here today. I think it's time for us as individuals to kind of start adapting as well. You've gone through some hardship, right?
Yeah.
How did you survive? You adapted.
Yep.
Same thing for me. I went through some hardship and I adapted, and here I am. So, you guys are going through some hardship. You adapt.
You have to adapt now. You have to realize that the new middle class is like 100 to 160,000.
Yeah.
That is middle class.
Crazy?
It's actually
Isn't
insane.
that crazy?
Because
Jesus.
you know what? A few years ago, somebody would tell you, our household income is 100 to 160 grand. You're like, okay, you're living life
You guys
good.
are good. You're
life.
happy. You
Now
can do what you
somebody
want.
says that, and you're like, okay, well, you're getting by, and
And most of you who are going to listen to this podcast, I know exactly what's going to go
That's
through your
insane.
mind. Like, really, you guys are talking about $100,000 as if it was nothing. Well, okay, how much do you make? Imagine how horrible your life must be right now if your only perspective is moving from 30 to 35 next year. You can't rely on an employer to be your only source of income.
No way.
It makes no sense.
If you rely on an employer as your only source of income, you are literally one step away from being broke. And that is simply being laid off or fired.
Which happens to everyone all the time. Look around you. If you haven't been fired or laid off, you know someone who has.
I have. Multiple
I
times.
have so many times. And what happens? Well, you got to start the search again. And, as you grow older, unless you innovate all the time, options are limited. So the key thing to remember is unless you innovate. So innovate. You have that options. Like, look, most of you have jobs that have, let's say, 40 hours a week, which is full-time. Let's say plus travel brings you up to 50. You probably have half an hour every day to kind of brainstorm ideas as to what you could be doing with your time, how you could monetize it. Like, I have a full-time job. I'm currently employed, thankfully, by a very good company, and I work in sales, so my income is fine. I still have projects on the side, nothing crazy, but I do this podcast, I talk about things with my friends, and you never know. It's always good to have ideas concurrently, because who knows what the future might hold. Like, I love my job and they seem to love me, but what if that changes? Then who knows what, am I gonna have to start over, look for another job? How often can I do that? Maybe I don't want to do that anymore. Maybe I just want to maybe I want stability. Maybe I want to be responsible for my own happiness, for my own financial wealth. Again, I'm in sales. I am responsible for my own financial health. If I work and I deliver, I get paid. If I don't, I don't. So that's kind of the mentality that I'm in already. And we're kind of trying to show this to you guys, as even if you're not in a sales mentality, you have to have one. You're always selling yourself anyway. And if
Yes,
you think you don't, you're being naive.
And me too, like I said, I have my own construction company, but I didn't start there. I was also an employee. I also worked in education. And, you know, I built this mentality over the years, but I realized it's because when you work for someone, they control everything. You kind of have no control over your own life. You have no control over the finances, your paycheck, anything. But when you work for yourself or a job where you get commission or your own business, yeah, it may fluctuate like this, but eventually your skills are going to build and compound, and it's going to go like this over time.
Yeah, you'll increase, man.
Exactly.
You'll increase for sure.
And especially in an economy like we have right now, we're in March of 2024, we're seeing layoffs and unemployment go up. So if you're just depending off of your job, like I said, you are one layoff or being fired away from literally broke, right? If you have no backup plan, if you don't have an emergency fund, like we said, a lot of people are living in debt right now. Okay, what if you have a bunch of debt and bills, but then you lose that job, or like you thought it was a secure position you were in, but it isn't? Because what do companies care about? They care about shareholder profits, they care about their revenues, and if they're not meeting what they want, they will have a layoff, because you know what? That's what companies do.
Yeah, that is what companies do.
You may think that you're very valuable and important to a company, but their profits are more important to them.
As they should be. They're not doing anything wrong. It's the nature of the business. We live in a capitalist society. Like, you have your own investments, I'm sure. You have your own expenses, I'm sure. And if some things you can't afford, let's say you like going on vacation, they're nice to have, right? Well, all of a sudden you can't afford them. Well, guess what? You're going to cut vacations. Are you going to feel bad for cutting vacations? No, and you shouldn't. Well, for business owners, it's the same thing. You're an expense. Are you a valuable expense? If you are, they're not going to cut you. If you're not a valuable expense, sure, some of them might keep you. Most of them will. They'll do their best, because, I mean, Jesus, it's people we're talking about, right? But at the end of the day,
we are talking about people, but to a company, especially a larger company, you're a number. And it depends on the value that you're providing to them. How much money are you making this company? If you're not making them that much, you're not that valuable, they will cut you if they have to.
That's actually a great idea, a great piece of advice for someone who's worried about their job. Think, are you currently providing enough value for the company to pay your salary? If the answer is yes, chances are you're good to go. If the answer is no, maybe you should try to figure out a way to provide more value. And on the side, learn in general in life how you can provide more value to people. It's just good advice, man. Like, look, it'll get you paid, it'll get you to be someone, and maybe it'll get you to figure out a way to generate income in non-traditional ways. Maybe you could become self-employed. Maybe you could become a business owner. Did you ever think you were going to become a business owner 10 years ago?
Ask me 10 years ago if I would own a construction company, I would laugh.
As would we all.
Yeah,
As would we all. Everybody who knew you back then, like, really? Her? Construction? No. Company? Maybe. Construction? Fuck no. And look at you going today, you know?
Look at me now.
And that's the thing. It's, you know, a series of good choices and luck.
And bad choices.
And bad choices.
And a lot
too.
of failures.
Jesus.
A
How
lot
often
of
did
failures.
you fail? We'll talk about failures. Have we talked about failures already?
Not so much.
Okay.
We'll do an entire episode.
We'll do
about
that. I think we should talk about failures and like mistakes and the desire of making mistakes. That's one we should add.
Very good.
Yeah. So we're rambling now, but you want to finish?
Yeah, I guess. So basically, the takeaway is, you know, middle class is essentially destroyed. What you're gonna want to do is improve your skills, earn more money. That is pretty much the only way I can think. If you want to live an average life, an average life meaning own a house, have a family, have a decent car. Nowadays, which is really sad. Yeah. Because, but that is the conclusion we have come to. Really, there's nothing else I could think of, because if you're just working an average job and making $20-$30 an hour, man, even two people at that salary, if you purchase a house, it will be very difficult. You will be living paycheck to paycheck. And then with a house, I could go on like an entire topic about how a house is literally not an investment, and it just a money pit. It drains your pockets. So that might not be in the books for everyone anymore. And just the fact that it isn't is the problem. Like we said, there's nothing wrong with renting. I would even suggest renting over buying a home a lot of the times for a lot of situations. But it's the fact that it's out of reach now for the average that is the issue.
Yeah. So make your own life. Make your own choices. Thankfully for now, we're still living in a world where you have an impact on your own existence. So make the most of it. You never know what could happen. But, you know, if you thought of the traditional path of going to school, going to a trade school / college, learning a skill, and then getting paid for that skill for, 40 years until you're retired by a company or by several companies, that's not going to happen.
Just don't see it.
I'm sorry, it's not going to happen.
Anymore.
If it does, good for you. But if it doesn't, then, you know, learn to market yourself. We can help you with that. If you're trying to figure out a way to, you know, monetize your knowledge, reach out to us. We'll talk about it privately. It's not, we haven't talked about it, but we can do that. You do it on your end, I do it on my end. We can do it together. You know, we can sit down, we can listen to your story. Who knows, man? Maybe it'll bring you some value. Maybe it won't, but it's worth a shot.
Like I said, you can't just depend off of a job nowadays.
No.
You have to do something more, like you said. You have to invest in yourself, your skills, your ability to earn more. You have to invest in assets, stocks, real estate, business, side hustle, whatever it is. But you can't just get by anymore with the bare minimum. That is a takeaway from this episode.
Thank you very much for listening to episode 5 of the W podcast. We're proud of being at episode 5. Looking forward to many more to come. And yeah, thank you. Always a pleasure.
And I hope this information helps you guys. Goodbye.
Peace.